What is up, guys? Daniel here with you. Welcome to another episode of Behind the Food. And unfortunately, today Jimmy can't be with us. He forgot that he is traveling. And as entrepreneurs, you know what that's all about. We do it all the time. But we are very, very excited to have Kamal on the episode. Kamal, you've got a really interesting startup called Revia. And I'm curious how you came to this space because the intersection of tech and CPG is a really interesting space, and there's a lot of work to be done there, in my opinion. And you're kind of taking a really cool stab at it with Revia. So tell us about how you came um, to this intersection of CPG and tech.
Yeah, great question actually. So I used to be part of Boston Consulting Group's tech incubator, BCGX, and in that role, I was involved with a lot of CPG companies, like some of these Fortune 100 CPG companies like Clorox, L'Oreal, and that's when I came into the problem of deductions, and I was like, oh, if these really big companies are having issues with deductions, I can only imagine what a lot of these smaller guys that we see in Whole Foods or Erewhon, like what are they facing? And I obviously, as you know, one does at some point in their lives, I hit Expo West and I went and validated that this problem exists. And then I was like, I'm just gonna stop working at BCG and go full send on this problem and work on it.
So that's a huge jump to go from a really, kind of cool, stable career at BCG to I'm going to go and I found this unique problem that needs a solve. And now, obviously, like you said, like Fortune 100 companies found this to be an issue, right? And yeah, if they have a problem, then, I mean, I've talked to Jimmy all the time. Like pallets of cookie dough, they'll claim breakage, and there's nothing wrong with the product, right?
Exactly.
They'll claim that oh, this pallet just got lost, and it's like, well, I didn't lose it, so why is it my fault that I'm getting deducted on this, right? So the jump to go from like BCG and consulting to I'm going to start my own thing. Um, were you at all hesitant? Was there any like trepidation about that at all?
Oh my God, I was frightened. And I actually heard it from all directions. Everyone was like, why would you leave a cushy career at BCG? Or like, think about the benefits, think about like the healthcare. And even now, right, like I'll have some friends contact me and they'll say, how much money are you making now? Or like, was it worth it? And I'm like, I don't think you get the plot, you know?
Right, and that's the thing is
Well,
it's hard to explain that to people. Like it's not about money today; it's about building something.
yes, exactly. It's about building something, not just building something, but building something in your own terms, like identifying your own problems. And there's a really nice feeling to just like looking at a problem and saying, this looks like a massive hill, but I think I can climb it. And then, halfway through, you're like, whoa, I'm like halfway up. Like, wow, that's amazing. I can't wait. I can't wait to see what the peak looks like.
Definitely. So you came from consulting, that gave you insight into this kind of unique space and this unique problem. Um, I find that a lot of times people that come from the consulting world have really fantastic operational excellence, right? But then they may not always have the flexibility and the adaptive, reactive speed that it requires to be an entrepreneur always. So, what was like the biggest challenge for you shifting from this really kind of stable world of working in consulting and coming with that kind of operational edge? To be fair, from that to hey, this is everything's changing every 30 seconds, every 2 minutes here.
Yeah, I mean that's a fair assessment of consulting. I would say I think that there's different types of consulting, and
Definitely.
the reason why I felt like more comfortable taking on this like challenge of like running my own startup is because in incubator world things were changing every 30 seconds, right? Like we were switching gears. Like one day the product would be like X, and the next day the product would be going in a completely 180-degree direction, and the next day you have to present to a board, right? So it was a lot of fast moving pieces. That being said, I do think that when I first started, I brought in some things from consulting that weren't the most helpful. So, like for example, my communication style was very like clean, tied up, professional, and I was trying to do sales,
Right. Right.
And people were like, "Why are you talking like that?"
Yeah. 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 Entrepreneurship is much looser. It's it's more conversational, but I do think I kind of missed that part of the story when you originally mentioned that you came from this like incubator space, which kind of gave you some really like deep exposure. Prior to BCG, did you have exposure to entrepreneurship? I'm sure you came from probably a business school at some level.
No, not business school, but actually like many years of working in tech startups, and that's how I
Okay.
ended up in the incubator. But like entrepreneurship, I think has like kind of been like touch and go for me until recently, where I'm like, oh, I've started this like my own consulting business, for example, and that was really fun. And then I was like, it's kind of like the same as BCG, so I'm gonna keep doing BCG. And I actually did like a lot of entrepreneurship work with my dad when I was young, like from 13 to like 18. I would be working with him wherever he would find business opportunities. I'd be like, all right, let me go with you. Let me see what you're doing. He would go like to auctions, housing auctions, to buy and flip houses, and I would go with him to see like what that whole process looks like. So I've been very like intrigued with it, but I was always told, stay on the stable path, just find something that works and stick to it. But obviously, like I was like, no, it's not fun enough for me.
Yeah, and I feel like for a lot of entrepreneurs, it is somewhat innate. You have that drive to do something that's your own. I know for like, I kind of have a similar story where in my early teen years, I was doing a baking business out of my house that was a lot larger than your typical like home baking business, and that really kind of created that initial like touch point for me where I was like, I want to do this for a living. But you go to college, you get that degree. I worked in tech before I did this too, and then I was like, you know what? I want to go back to doing what I was doing in my teen years and do something that's my own. And so yeah, I feel like a lot of us um, who decided to go full time into entrepreneurship had some amount of previous exposure in our teens or 20s that kind of whetted our appetite for it to some degree. Otherwise, we wouldn't have necessarily just made the jump because it's a big jump to make when you're going from making great money, having a stable income, and then all of a sudden you're in. We got to make payroll somehow, this week.
Yeah,
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 definitely. So
exactly.
did
And sorry, to that point of like your baking business when you were 13, the one thing I can say is I imagine that like being an entrepreneur now and like comparing that to when you were 13, it probably gives you a lot of spark of like curiosity and this like childhood, I can learn anything, I can do anything, I can accomplish things. And I think that's probably what we're all really chasing is that high of like I remember being young and like going to offices with my dad to sell ink. Like he started an ink business, and I remember just being so curious. Like I wonder what I can say to these office people to make sure that they buy my dad's ink. And it was just like it was like a little bit of a play. It was a little bit of a learning, and it was a little bit of like I'm also building skills of confidence that'll last forever.
Yeah, there's definitely like the interdisciplinary aspect of it, right? It's not like you're siloed into one thing. You're constantly wearing 10 different hats all the time. And I think for a certain type of brain, that certain type of person, that is extremely appealing. And for others, it's terrifying. So, if you find yourself gravitating to that, it's probably the right path for you. So I'm guessing you went to school, you worked in tech before you did BCG. So when you went from BCG to your founding Revia, did you do the whole, hey, we're going to, write a business plan, a pitch deck, start raising a pre-seed round? Like, how did that process look for you to get it off the ground?
No, it's actually just as I described. It was I had this idea, went to Expo, validated the idea, and sold sold a product, like sold a
Wow.
service actually.
So
And
you went from
and
idea to we're selling this like right away.
yeah, yeah, exactly. It was like it was very like BCG conditioning too. It was just like, oh, like we really want to focus on validating that there is a problem to be solved, that there is people willing to pay for the problem to be solved, and it was just those like very like crude core principles of do people need it? Are they willing to pay for it? Okay, yes, now let's double down on it.
Got it. So yeah, you didn't necessarily go like the typical like VC path where you're like, we're gonna write the business plan, write a pitch deck, go and sit down and pitch 100 people and try to raise a 2 million, $5 million seed round. You were like, we're going to go out there and actually sell this thing from day one. That was kind of the intention behind that. And so is it bootstrapped? Have you raised it all for this for Revia?
It's all bootstrapped right now.
Incredible,
Yeah.
incredible. That's really cool. Yeah, I had to raise a little bit. I raised 100K for ours because that was there was some we needed food trucks, right? And those don't come free. Nowadays, I've learned that you can owner finance, and you really don't need the cash. You can find ways to creatively finance them. But back then, it was new. I was figuring things out. So yeah. So how long has Revia been in existence now? How many years have you been doing this?
Yeah, we've been around for 2 years and we just came out of closed beta actually.
Nice. That's fantastic. So in that beta, how many users would you say?
So yeah, we worked with 3 users or 3 companies to build
Hmm.
the product and just get really good feedback. And in December, we came out of closed beta and just launched it.
That is really cool. Yeah, I was just scrolling through the website before hopping on the podcast. It looks really clean. It's very unique. It describes the proposition really nicely, like what you're trying to solve for. And like I said, talking to Jimmy, he is much more in the CPG world than I am. But it's a constant complaint to everyone I talk to in CPG about deductions and write downs and it's chargebacks. Like how do we solve for this? And it really is a margin killer in a very very thin margin business. Um, how does Revia help solve for that?
Yeah, so that's actually like one of the areas how I came into solving for this problem is identifying the industry itself is very how do you say cash strapped, right? Like it's a cash flow intensive business. You need cash for your next production run, you need cash for marketing. Everything is really just centered on like your ability to survive in this industry is based on how much capital you have available to actually get to the next point, get to the next level, to the next retailer, right? And it's really unfortunate because there's this whole like shadow economy of CPG, which is deductions, right? And so anytime a retailer or a distributor pays you for whatever product you've sold them, they'll take deductions off the top. And it might be, like you said, for shortages or for promotions that you actually agreed to, slotting fees, early payments, you name it, right? There can be a whole list of reasons why they take a percentage of whatever you charge them. But the thing to note is like it's not always right, right? So like a lot of these distributors are using legacy systems and legacy processes to write these deductions out for you, and sometimes they make mistakes, and it's not intentional always, right? But they'll make mistakes, and it's important that there is someone on your team that's actually going line by line and validating what the deduction is for. So for example, like most recently we found an invalid for a client, but it was charged for a competitor's like a competitor's bill, and we were like, wait, this is not aligned to our brand that we're working with.
That's crazy. So yeah, you're sometimes seeing deductions for brands that are like they're just charging it to the wrong account completely.
Exactly.
Wow, that's incredible. Yeah, and a lot of these CPG teams, they're really lean. Like there's sometimes less than 10 people on these teams. So trying to find somebody who can really dig in line by line is nearly impossible, which is a great use case for AI, really. Like that's it's fantastic. Um, how AI intensive is your product? Like is it 100% an AI product? Is it humans plus AI? Like how does that look?
It's humans plus AI. So the initial part of the validation on the product itself is done by AI, but then and then there's like initial disputes submitted with AI. But then wherever there needs like some additional management or like really evaluating the document and making sure that all the data is passing correctly, right? So like a lot of these distributors they send documents that are either scanned in, faxed, or like they have like writing all over it. So every now and then you do need like a human input. So we have this SaaS tier as well as a managed service tier to actually continue pushing on the account. So we're not just like giving a brand a SaaS platform and say, go figure it out, there you go, but actually a managed service around it to help you like recover as much back as possible.
Yeah, I think that's it. You said like it has to be a managed service because the brands don't have the team to do this. Like they typically don't. I mean, sometimes they do where they've raised enough where they have a real finance department that can actually look at this. But like I said, like most of these teams, they're less than 10 people. Sometimes it's 2 to 5 people trying to run these companies. And the other thing you mentioned that I really found interesting is that so much of this business is still on paper.
Yes.
It's ridiculous how much of this business is still on paper and is not, you know, digital. Like, how much does AI help when it comes to taking those digital documents and turning them into, or sorry, these paper documents and digitizing them so that they can properly be looked through and and those deductions can be found.
Yeah, it really depends on what we're looking for in the document. So I've found that if it's scanned in documents, OCR works relatively well. But I have found that, if you're looking for handwritten pieces of information, that's usually a lot harder.
Yeah, definitely. And I could see as AI improves, it'll probably get better at being able to interpret that handwriting and hopefully, make that gap shrink even more between like how much is fully automatable from going from like scanned document to, hey, we can actually, you know,
Yeah.
look at
And
this and
and
do
the
something
other
with it.
Yeah, the other thing is there's also the availability of inference with AI. So even if it can't necessarily read the document, if it has had a human code this type of document in a specific way, like let's say like 20 times, it can then infer that okay, this type of document is usually related to reason of shortage, for example.
Right, right. Yeah, so it can look at its previous work and say, hey, this is probably what this is, and at least suggest that to the user to some degree.
Exactly. And that's how we build the product too, right? Like we're training it so that it understands the documents and the reasoning and the business logic much better. So we're kind of like steering it versus letting it just run wild on people's databases.
Definitely. So obviously coming on a podcast like this is, a kind of customer acquisition for you, which is great. We get people in the CPG space who listen to this, which is awesome. But beyond like doing things like this, or is this the customer acquisition strategy for you to do things like this? Like what is the plan behind like how do I get people to use this product?
A couple of things. So like things like this, podcasts, any sort of like events, webinars, those are really good. We do a lot of conferences, trade shows, Expo West. That's where we landed our first customer. So we're like, we just need to double down on the strategy. Um, we used to do emails quite a bit, but we just stopped that because this emails are dead.
Yeah, they
Um,
are. It's sad.
it's sad, yeah. It's the end of an era. But other than that, it's a lot of like I would say LinkedIn outreach, a lot of X outreach.
Definitely. And how is that working for you? Is it converting pretty well?
Yeah, it's really
Nice.
well. I think
Nice.
and if I had to rank all of our go-to-market activities and see what's performing the highest, it's I would say events is number one, and then having a social media channel as the form of outreach as number two is like two of the biggest high impact things we do for go-to-market. And everything else is like word of mouth, right? Everything else is like referrals, and that seems to work really well as well.
So does that put you on the road a lot? Like, are you constantly on the road going to trade shows and all that kind of thing?
Quite a bit, actually. Yeah, like
Yeah.
I would say we're at conferences maybe like at least twice a month.
Yeah, that's cool. You kind of remind me in one sense a little bit of Jake Carls from Midday Squares because he's that guy who's out there in front promoting the brand, wherever he can, and he calls himself, I think, Chief Rainmaker. And
Yeah.
yeah, a lot of
I saw
times
recently that his mom actually came to Expo and was pitching to buyers for him.
that's so cool.
So genius.
Yeah, yeah, it's so cool. But yeah, a lot of times these become family businesses to some degree. I mean, I know in my specific example, like I'm the eldest of 13 kids, and I think five of my siblings have worked with us in the business at some level at some point. So yeah, that's been really fun to see,
Did
like
you
being
say
able to get.
13?
Yeah, I've got eight. I got 10 brothers. Sorry, 9 brothers and 3 sisters. Yeah, it's very unusual.
It's
Yeah,
not unusual. That's so cool. It must be
yeah, it
nice
is
to have a
cool.
great family, a big
It
family.
is. It is. Yeah, and it's been really helpful growing the business because they have different skill sets they've helped work. And so, like, my brother is, um, he does everything design. So he's the design director. He just finished hand painting one of our food trucks. It looks really cool. Yeah, so we're kind of migrating from being like a food truck brand into CPG, which is kind of how I met Jimmy. Was that intersection between kind of the restaurant and the CPG space, and how like hero products out of the restaurant space end up moving into CPG, and that's how we kind of met. We had been in a kitchen where we were working together, and he was DDC. He was throwing tons of cookie dough through Amazon and Instagram ads and things like that, and I was making tons of empanadas and out there trucking all the time. And, we just had these radically different strategies, but we were in the same space working together, which is kind of like you mentioned, this incubator environment where you get a lot of like really cool synergies where people are working side by side and they kind of meet and maybe share things and build really cool relationships. So like for you coming from that like incubator environment where there's like a lot of dynamism to like, I'm going to do this on my own now. Was that difficult for you to go from like, I've got this like space I'm working with a lot of like, cohorts of different, entrepreneurs all the time or different business leaders too. I'm actually going to go out on my own and do this on my own now. Was that hard at all?
Honestly, I cannot say that's even true because
Nice.
I never felt like I was alone.
Great.
I started this with my co-founder and my best friend who I've known since I was like 8 years old. And it was actually we've been talking about starting a business for like years, and then we're like, let's try this, let's try that, and then all of a sudden we're like, hey, we've arrived at an idea. Let's go in on it together. I think it's felt different from the incubator environment where everything needs to be kind of buttoned up and clean, and this is more of like let's just
We're the
see
real
how it
world.
is. Let's try really quick. Let's fail really quick. We don't have to worry about any MDP approvals. We don't need to worry about like things to be really like client facing perfect. We just need to worry about things being a good business and a good business decision.
Right? Does it work? That's what
Yeah,
matters.
does it work? Yeah, exactly. And it's amazing how fast you get things done when your only priority is does it work and does it help the client? Does it help us make money?
Yeah, it goes from like timelines that were months to days. Like it's
Days,
crazy how fast things happen.
hours,
Yeah,
hours. I
hours.
remember
Yeah,
I texted my best friend and my co-founder an idea yesterday, and by the end of the day, we were like looking at different options for what this could look like.
yeah, yeah. It's amazing how entrepreneurship kind of moves at the speed of like reality, which is blazing fast. But it also has this kind of drawback, which is it doesn't have the resources, right? So like your larger companies, they move a lot slower, but they move with a ton of resources behind them. Whereas when you're in the entrepreneurial space, it's all you. There's not a lot behind that. So I'm curious, like, have you ever, like, you mentioned like in the CPG space, we have really thin margins. Cash is really, really tight. We're flipping it all the time. But you're in this kind of new world where it's a tech business, but it's also in the AI space, which is changing the amount of cash it takes to, right? You're not doing that big raise anymore to get off the ground. How does that look for you? Like trying to build an like AI native software company that's really kind of a new model that we haven't seen before.
I think I feel like super lucky to be
Yes.
building a business in this time. Like, I actually cannot genuinely imagine how people did it, like by hand, manually, at every single thing, like making decisions or like what's the best strategy. I really applaud. I really applaud all of the businesses that have come thus far. But yeah, I definitely think it has shortened the timeline for build because you can QA much faster, you can build much faster, you can actually like go from idea to feature within, like I said, a couple of hours. So that's been really cool. I think that the one thing that the drawback around it is maybe like prioritization has kind of gone out the window because everything is like a couple of hours, right? So one thing I found is that we're like, yeah, we need to do everything, and my brain, right? I have 80 ideas like per minute. And so I'm like, I need to implement all 80 ideas today. Otherwise, I cannot sleep. So I think that's probably a little bit of a drawback. But to your point of larger companies being able to move with a lot more resources, but smaller companies, right? They have the benefit of time. There's You might have read this book. It's called The Innovator's Dilemma, right?
Mhm.
Where you've like built something and you're like, this works, the market is good with it, but then there's all these like competitors coming in who are solving for things that you might not have solved for. So even if you have total market share, you still are at the risk of potentially losing your customers because you're not necessarily constantly innovating. And once you've innovated and landed at something, you want to stick to it because that's what good companies do. Like Google's a great example. They found ads as like a great business model. They stick with it. And now that AI is here, right? They're kind of like, what? How do we present our ads? Do we just stick them direct to Gemini, or do we still present the ads that people have been paying for? So I really think that in this time, the winners will be defined by who can prioritize the best and implement at that same speed versus like attacking 100 things all at once, like me. But now I've learned that, and I'm starting to like prioritize much better.
That's a great point because I think about like I have a buddy who has a web development company, and so he has transformed everything to where now it's all AI native. And I've seen him like great example was he was building a uh, Jira replacement to use internally instead of paying for that software subscription, right? So he used Lovable, he vibe coded it, and it works incredibly well. But then he realized, well, there's no real cap on the development resources like there used to be. So now he's just trying to build everything. And like you said, the prioritization kind of
Is out,
flies
yeah.
out the window. And it's like what actually matters now when the development resources are essentially infinite, right? Like there's no real cap on how much resource you have. There's no number of developers. It's kind of like you just build it as fast as you can. But obviously, like you said, like the QA, making sure it's actually validated, that it's actually going to work, it's not going to break, like that's actually much more important to some degree now too. So um, did you guys kind of build everything like with AI tools, or did you have like developers working in tandem? Like, how did that work for you?
Yeah, so we have both. We have developers working on the product, and then we also have AI to like kind of inform the feature set and general like direction of the product.
Nice. And like, what are your guys' favorite like AI coding tools? Like, I geek out about this stuff, so I'm curious.
I love Claude. Honestly.
Okay. Yeah.
That's the one. I use so I've found it to be really helpful to do some planning, original planning with Claude, and then have it do like the first pass, and then I'll run another second pass with Codex, like for
Nice.
backend,
Yeah. Yeah.
and then you can install skills for Claude. So you've probably seen all of the skills you can install. So I install like really nice design skills, marketing skills, sales skills, and have it change the front end. So Claude
Nice.
mostly for front end and planning, and then Codex for back end.
That's really cool. Yeah, like if you ever, I don't know if you've messed with Lovable at all, but I was shocked at what it could do. If you haven't played with it, I definitely recommend it. It's a lot of fun, and it's really shocking what it can do. Because it kind of like combines all the engines together into one, and then it kind of makes them compete for the output. It creates some really like incredible, and it iterates very quickly in terms of like how quickly. Like, a lot of these engines take a while. When you give them a big task.
Yeah,
Lovable seems to be faster for some reason. I haven't quite figured out why that is, but they're doing some kind of magic on the back end.
maybe they'll
NVIDIA,
be running multiple agents to
I
do
think so.
like splitting the problem up into like multiple agents.
Yeah, I think so. All right, so we talked a lot about the back end. Um, when it comes to like exposure to CPG, because you're coming at this from the tech angle, right? And you've not necessarily like worked in a CPG company per se, right? How do you go about like gaining user experience to be able to build the feature set that actual CPG brands and founders need? Like, how do you get that experience or that exposure to what they need every day? Because it's not like you're running a CPG brand yourself.
Yeah, I so as part of building this, right, one of the first things we did was like really like get ourselves comfortable with the data that we're going to see. And that helps with everything, right? From like selecting feature sets to identifying what the UI should look like to what to QAing the product, right? It all boils down to really understanding the problem really well. And so we spend a lot of time just like looking at the documents, looking at historical disputes that a brand has done, and familiarize ourselves with the process and their end-to-end experience of like deductions and like other parts of the business that touches deduction. So we're like, so it's true, right, that I come from a tech background, but because I've spent so much time in the deductions world, I can speak more confidently about like what they'll see, and they believe that, right? So a lot of people are like, yeah, I've actually had this experience, or I've seen deductions like that. And when you can speak with subject matter expertise or like subject matter information, in my case, under your belt, I think people tend to trust you a lot more. Yeah.
Absolutely. No, that makes complete sense. Yeah, deductions are deductions, whether they're in CPG or in any other
Yeah.
industry. Exactly. Yeah, that makes
Yeah.
complete sense.
Exactly.
Yeah, yeah. So you mentioned you have a co-founder. Me and my brother do too, and we found that we have kind of different skill sets, so we've kind of divided tasks. Right, I'm more operationally focused, so I will keep the trucks booked day to day. I run the trucks, and he does design work. He keeps our branding on point, socials, website, recipe development, things like that. How does the responsibility or duty split look like between you and your co-founder? How does that look for you?
Yeah, so same thing, right? Like we've identified that we have different skill sets, but they all really converge really well. She's really good at recovery and like looking at the documents. I've found that I tend to make a little bit more mistakes when I'm like doing manual validation against some of our clients' stuff, but she's very good at identifying invalids and seeing like what's needed. And I would say like my role is more on like branding and more on the product side, so like helping improve like things on the marketing side. We're kind of sharing the marketing front because like we both have different approaches, and like so we divide the work. Um, and we're both on sales, right? Like distribution is what matters the most right now, right? Especially now that like AI can make things a lot faster. So we double down on distribution and like find every avenue we can.
Yeah, definitely. So, distribution, like, how does that look like with a like AI native product? I know that like it's just a new world. Like we're kind of building this playbook as we go. So, like, how does that look like for you?
So what do you mean, like in the
So when
AI
you're
native
like,
world?
so like in the old space, it was about hey, we're gonna get tons of enterprise clients, right? We're gonna hit our Googles, our Microsofts, our Amazons. And those would be like your channel to get like big distribution. You would just get them on board, right? And you'd have a big enterprise client. Now you're looking at, hey, especially in the world of CPG, it's a lot of smaller, you know, there's not as many like big enterprise players per se. There's a ton, especially for what you're building is kind of like a distributed product for a lot of smaller brands. How does it look like for you to get that out there, like on the day to day basis? Are you just making a bunch of phone calls? Are you just is it just trade shows? Like I guess my question is like when you say you're both on distribution a lot, what does that actually look like day to day?
Oh, like how does it materially translate into like
Exactly.
okay. So yeah, like we're both always going to events, and it
Hmm.
actually helps to have like a buddy, like a partner,
Yeah,
in
definitely,
these trade shows.
absolutely.
And we're meeting like the same people sometimes, and we're kind of attacking, like the way we think about it is we're attacking like the same problem but from different directions. So we'll meet different people at the same company, or we'll like do outbound for like different people at the same company. So like we'll split the roles where I'll do like emails and she'll do some like marketing things, or I'll do marketing things, she'll do emails, and it kind of switches based on wherever the idea is. A new idea that we've been playing around with is like influencer marketing, like B2B
Hmm.
influencer marketing.
Interesting. Yeah,
And so we're like I'm gonna reach out to these types of influencers and these types of people, and then she's like I'm gonna reach out to like founders and operators in this like beverage space, for example. So we have found like we both end up doing the same activities, but like attack it from like a different perspective.
yeah. So with you guys, you kind of have this really unique ability to like almost body double, where you can double your efforts if needed, or like in certain specific instances, it makes more sense to have you both in the same booth at a trade show, where you can kind of do
Exactly.
both. Yeah, yeah,
Exactly. Or
definitely.
if
That's
it's
really
like a
cool.
really big trade show, right? Like Expo West, it kind of helps to have 3 or 4 people go and like and see as many booths as possible versus just like us two, right?
Definitely. So, like I said, there's thousands of CPG brands. On paper, your product is kind of great for all of them. How do you identify the subset of, you know, the niche or the target market that you're trying to attack first out of these thousands of brands?
I would say that midsize is ideally
Okay.
our initial target. So like
Yeah.
and the reason for that is really small brands sometimes they don't have the recovery that they expect, right? So I know it sounds silly to say it, but they're the ones who need it the most. But sometimes they're not doing enough volume via distributors for it to make sense for them to sign on with a service like Revia. And then the mid-sized brands, they're like, okay, yes, like cash is important. We know that there's deductions to be recovered, but we don't necessarily have the resources to hire someone full time to go after it. And then for like some of the bigger teams, it's like, yes, we do have the resources, but we want to apply our resources towards like these other higher priority things. So
Absolutely.
that's kind of how it plays out. And like I've seen like brands on board at like $10 million to like $30 million, all the way to like 50. And they're all of them. They're like, yeah, we need to get this off of our plates one way or the other. And even if they have like a strong finance team, they're kind of like, yeah, we need to like apply those people towards other higher priority tasks.
Definitely. So, you obviously work with the CPG brands, but you're also working with distributors, and they have margins often that are not much better than the CPG brands, which is often why they're so incentivized to over deduct, right? So how does that relationship look like? Because you guys are kind of somewhat in between the two, not particularly because the CPG brand is clearly your customer, but you're interfacing with both. How does that relationship with the big distributors look like for you?
Yeah, the distributors every now and then, right? Like it's mostly I guess an administrative relationship more than anything, right? Where the people who come and like submit disputes on behalf of the brand. So I wouldn't say we have much of a relationship outside of that. Sometimes they'll say
Gotcha.
like, "Oh, this is valid," or "We intend on keeping this charge on file," and that's when we push back or like get in contact with a buyer. But broadly speaking, I haven't heard much feedback from distributors on what we're doing.
That's really interesting because I'm wondering, like, as you scale and as you kind of attack this problem at a larger level, if they will kind of see the relationship as somewhat adversarial because, let's be real, at some level you're, shrinking their margins, but justifiably so because they're taking money that isn't theirs, right? Yeah, yeah. So I'm curious how that goes as you continue to grow.
Yeah, I would be curious as well. It's something that I've been thinking about as well. Like, is the problem I'm solving? Is there a shelf life to this problem where eventually distributors
Hmm.
come around and start like fixing their legacy systems? But the way
Great
I see
question.
it, the other thing I think is like historically it's taken them so long to change like the format of a document, so I don't
Yeah,
see that happening like
right.
anytime soon, but you never know, right? Like it's possible. Whether it will be adversarial, I think no, because we're not like cutting their margins on something that is rightfully theirs, right? It's we're helping them identify an error that should have been resolved on their end
From the
and
start.
from the start, and we're not I don't think we're necessarily cutting into anything that they would have earned correctly or like
Sure. That's the right answer. That's the
yeah.
right answer. Yeah.
Yeah.
So I'm interested to see, like, obviously there's deductions in industries beyond CPG, right? This is a broader problem. So suppose that it does maybe, I don't think it's going to get solved. Like, I think you've got, I think your, your offering has long-term potential. I think it's going to grow. Have you thought about expanding into industries beyond CPG in the future with other like branded offerings that are built on the same technology potentially?
Potentially, it's possible, but not likely in the near term future. Just because I have done some research on deductions in like other
Hmm.
industries, and the business logic around that is entirely different, and so it would
Got
require
it.
like full product adaptation, full marketing adaptation, and I think that what's probably best for Revia right now as a business is to just prioritize and focus on CPG and like in a market that's it's been proven it's working really well. But I don't see it being out of the possibility in like the next 3 4 years. But
Sure,
like
sure.
near term, like it wouldn't be doing CPG's industry a good service if we like
Right.
do too many things at once.
Absolutely. No, that makes complete sense. And kind of to your point about, everything being on paper, it blows my mind how much of the overall business is still not digitized. For example, we had, I can't remember his name right now, as a founder of another AI native company called Deep Forest. Have you heard of them? So what he's doing is he's going out there and building a AI enabled kind of a search function or database of manufacturers, right? Of your co-men, because trying to find co-men that have specific capabilities for brands and matching those is a nightmare right now, because oftentimes these people don't have a website. They barely
Mm,
have a presence online at all. So he's decided that he's going to go out there and essentially build a tool where you could go on there and say, "Hey, you talk to it just like an AI, where you say, "Hey, we do this. We're looking for a manufacturer that can make this kind of gluten-free cookie, and it needs these types of ingredients, but we have no idea." And it'll go through and actually find someone that's a
finds
match for that, right? So
Wait,
I
that's
think,
brilliant. It's kind of like ThomasNet almost, but like AI native ThomasNet.
yeah,
Is
yeah,
it
we interview.
ThomasNet or
I think that's right. Yeah. But yeah, definitely check it out, because I feel like you guys would be, like, you guys would have a lot of, I forget his name off the top of it, but the company name is Deep Forest AI. And
okay,
it's really cool.
yeah,
He's in the CPG space, but on the co-man manufacturing side versus the brand distributor side.
yeah. No, that
It's,
sounds really cool. Actually, it sounds
yeah,
like
yeah.
it really does sound like a AI native ThomasNet.
I think so. Yeah.
Yeah.
And he found, like, so essentially, I think, like, to your point about, like, I don't think this problem is going away anytime soon. The industry at large moves really, really slowly. And the speed of progress is like lightning fast, and it's moving right past it, which is crazy because it's our food, right? It's like, that's what we eat every day. It's the product on the shelf that we, as a consumer, it's like, how is this not like the most tech forward?
Wait, do you think food should move faster? Like, do you think
I
that?
would think so. Because if you think about it, it's like real physical resources in real time, and it's razor thin margin. So you would think you'd want every technical edge possible to, be as resource efficient as possible when your margins are this thin to start with, and they're not getting, there's no major innovation coming out that's going to grow that margin, except for maybe AI to some degree.
Well, okay. Can I push you on that? Do you mind?
Sure.
How do you like what parts of the process do you think should be expedited with AI in food specifically?
Yeah, absolutely. So I think that you will see a couple of things happen, and I think, you may have seen this interview that Travis Kalanick did recently, with his new company Atoms that he just took out of stealth.
I did see that one actually.
Right. So one of the things he's saying is that, like, he's going to basically take the entire stack from raw ingredient all the way to fulfillment. And, we're talking AI enabled robots manufacturing lettuce bowls, right? We're talking about, um, no drivers in delivery vehicles, right? He sees that as like the full stack. And I'm like, well, there's a lot of like lost opportunity here or lost margin. And he sees it. I think he sees the future where we're headed, which is like everything is tech enabled, everything is AI native from, the farm all the way to the point where the food gets dropped off at someone's front porch, right? So to me, it's like he's kind of blindsiding the entire industry because no one he sees it, right? He knows where he's headed, but the rest of the industry seems like it's really far behind on this. So yeah, I think like manufacturing automation is a touch point where AI is going to make a big difference. I think that the administrative side, which is what you're tackling, is an obvious touch point, right? Like there's so much administrative drag, and I would say even logistics and distribution is another one. Like it seems to me like every aspect of this stack is going to be touched at some point.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
I actually now that you frame it like that, I actually do see that point of view.
I don't think I would have seen it until Travis he had done an interview previously that Jimmy kind of exposed me to, where he was kind of hinting at this before he went out of stealth. And he was kind of like trying to like hint at it, but then he kind of went out and just outright said it on this last podcast. So I'm fascinated to see where that ends up. But yeah, I think the world is leaning into where you're at right now, and like you've kind of gotten ahead of it to some degree, which is a good thing. And hopefully, there's a lot of CPG founders watching this episode that will take advantage of the product that you're building. So that being said, people that are watching this episode right now that are CPG founders, what do you want them to know about Revia that will hopefully entice them to like reach out to you and build a relationship?
The one thing that they need to know about Revia is that I know we've only been talking about deductions till now, but think of Revia as an end-to-end tool, which allows
Mm-hmm.
you to do revenue planning, allow you to do like multiple scenarios around your promo calendars and forecast what the impacted lift would be based on your historical data. But all of that ties back into the deductions you actually get. And so it's revenue growth and a margin optimization tool where you retain your margin and you plan for growth. So if you're looking for a lot of that in your business, check out revia.ai. And if you mention this show to us, we'll give you a free 12-month look back.
That's awesome. That you kind of hit the nail on the bed there, which is margin optimization. And I think that those tools have kind of been built for other businesses. Like in my case, which is almost more restaurant facing right now, and we're kind of pivoting towards CPG. There's a tool called Margin Edge that does something similar, right? And they work with the people you source from, right? So your Cisco's, US Foods, et cetera. And then they also work on the actual on my side, right? They look at our financials and figure out where can we save money on both, where you're buying and sourcing the product from, and also when you're actually running the
That's
business on
cool.
both sides. Yeah,
So
yeah.
it's like a procurement help.
It's
Like an
procurement
AI that
help.
helps you procure like the cheapest ingredients or like the highest quality
Exactly.
ingredients for the best price.
Right. And their value prop is essentially that we are allowing you as a small player to have the same type of uh, tools that the larger brands have when they negotiate with their procurement and their ingredient sourcing. So they're able to negotiate, with big volume discounts and that kind of thing.
So it's like a bulk purchasing organization, kind of.
It's like that combined with like software or AI enablement, along with looking into the books of the restaurant and saying, hey, where can we find money there? So it's kind of that same thing, like kind of like an overarching like margin optimization across the board. So yeah, I think that makes a lot of sense because in my view as an operator, you work in such a margin thin business. Anything that helps you grow that even by 3 or 5% year over year, or even just 1 year is a huge deal. Yeah, and I'm guessing to some degree, you kind of saw that at BCG before you were even in this space, right? Where there's like hyper competitive spaces where margins are really thin, and like how can we even squeeze out 1, 2, 3% more?
Exactly.
Yeah,
Exactly. So we would look at books for like some of these companies, and I'm not going to say who and what, but like we would see some things and we'd be like, oh, that's a crazy amount of revenue that's just going back to the distributors. And we would look at the books actually and evaluate it and see, wow, that's not right. And then when we would ask them about it, they're like, yeah, that's just how it is. Cost of doing business. And we have this person on the team and so like what we did at BCG, by the way, was like a lot of it was explorative work. So we try to look at like what is going on with your current process and like where can we find like potential for optimization. So we'd be like looking end to end and trying to find a little niche startup idea in like one of their big problems. And
Yeah,
that's
so you were
that's
kind
kind
of
of where it
doing,
landed.
yeah,
Yeah, like
exactly.
it was
You're
like
kind of doing the same thing.
exactly, and that's what we're doing the same thing now of like looking at this entire process and finding where in deductions can we solve.
I'm going to be really curious to see if more people from the consulting world start doing something similar where they find kind of a scalable use case like that and then break it out and start their own business, right? I think that'll be really fascinating to see because before that took, tons of raise and you had to build a team and you had to build, and now it's like it just happens
Now it's just yeah, you
instantaneously.
just think about it and you can like move at the
Yeah.
speed of light, literally.
Yeah. Not to harp on Travis Kalanick anymore, but he kind of had this idea, this idea that as AI kind of goes through the economy, you're going to see what he calls kind of tentpole people, which will support it. Without those people, it doesn't have actual uh, use to people, right? So, for example, he mentioned like if you're building, say, a big office building, without plumbers, that building has no value, right? Like it's not going anywhere, plumbers and electricians, right? And I feel like in some sense, you could argue that it's kind of the same thing with what you're doing, where AI is really cool, but without people that are actually creating viable use cases for it that actually solve a real problem at scale, it kind of doesn't really help anybody, right? It's just a tool that just sits there. So I'm really interested to see how this kind of marriage of like the speed of AI plus like deep human expertise in a specific industry or subject matter launch a bunch of new businesses. It's going to be fascinating to watch.
Yeah, and I think being vertically oriented versus like horizontal is going to be like is going to decide whether you're winning or losing in like the next decade if you're able to solve multiple problems for like the same niche with AI, you actually have a much better chance and you can do that much faster now as well.
Absolutely, yeah. That's absolutely where it's headed. I think that you're going to see people going extremely deep, right? They're not going to be as broad anymore, which is great because that helps all of us do better work every day, right? Like it's
Exactly.
yeah, yeah,
Exactly.
and it also pushes away from like the idea of like, for example, if you look at uh, EHR in the medical field, right? It's an extremely large, complex tool that doesn't always fit all of these different use cases, right? AI is going to change that completely.
I'm actually surprised EHR is still around.
You just grew, yeah, yeah. My dad
It's
works in this medical field, so yeah, I'm surprised it's still around too. Yeah, yeah. It's kind of a trash product, in my
it's kind of
opinion.
a trash product.
Yeah,
I haven't heard of EHR in ages actually.
yeah, yeah. And it's and really, in my opinion, the reason it's still around is because of the subsidies that were built into Obamacare to yeah, exactly right. That carrot and stick approach with
Yeah.
the reimbursements for Medicare and Medicaid. Yeah,
The other thing is, right, like we think CPG is slow, but healthcare is like
that's a good point.
is
Glacial.
glacial. It's so
Yeah,
slow.
yeah.
I've been talking to a friend who was doing something similar in the pharmaceutical space of like deductions or like rebates, and he was like, yeah, our sales cycle is like 2 years per per customer.
That is insane. That is absolutely insane. I can't even
So can you
imagine that.
imagine like being a startup founder who's bootstrapping? You have to wait for 2 years
You'd be toast.
for you'd be toast, right? So like startups fail and die based on your availability
Revenue
of
cycle.
capital.
Yeah,
Yeah,
exactly.
and if you cannot make it those 2 years before you like close or like even like have forget the cash, right? Even have the momentum, the internal momentum of I'm actually doing something and building something and I'm solving a problem. You don't get that for 2 years.
It's insane. It's absolutely insane. Yeah, I'm really curious to see how this next generation of kind of tech enabled founders make use of AI because not only is the need so big, but also the tools are moving so quickly to build the actual solutions, right? And like my buddy who has this web development company, he was saying that he was for a minute there he was thinking that his company was just going to be irrelevant. That was his first assumption was, oh well, if people can just go to a vibe coding tool like Lovable and do it themselves, why wouldn't they? Then you realize that that doesn't actually work because they don't have the deep expertise to properly prompt and
Debug.
ask. Exactly, debug, prompt the tool, make sure that it's actually creating useful products. So it's like, no, I think that it's going to be the opposite. The people with the deep expertise, like you, are going to build tools that other people simply can't because they don't have that expertise. And
Yeah,
you can't
or the
just,
time or the patience, right? Like
there you go.
anyone who is prompted to build anything knows that it requires some serious patience and time and actual like focus on writing your prompts. It's not like a hey, I want you to move this label to the right. You have to be so specific, so nuanced with your prompting and
Hmm.
yeah, I
That's the
think
only way to get value out of it.
that's the only way to get value out of it. Exactly. And I think that like soon we're gonna start seeing a lot of like, I think this came out when ChatGPT first came out, this like job title of prompt engineer, like that's just going to be prevalent now. Like and I don't know if you're following on X, like everyone's like hiring. They're like hiring for vibe coders now.
It's insane. And I think what it's also going to do is it's going to kind of shift the um, demand skill set away from like engineers, which was, we were telling them, go get STEM degrees, right? To, hey, what about people that are super deep in humanities and understand language, right? And can properly use language to prompt, right? That's going to be a dramatic, I think you're going to see a shift back to humanities. I could be wrong, but I think that you're going to see a shift back to, hey, we need to have a broad enough understanding of human knowledge and experience and history to where we can interact with something that has this high level of intelligence in a way that extracts value from it. I could be wrong, but I think you're going to see a resurgence of humanities.
No, I think that's totally valid, right? Like we would if we can solve for resource availability in our society, right? Like
That's a
everyone
big
can
one.
have if everyone can have what they need to like feel good and like pay
Hmm.
rent, have a roof over their shoulders.
Right.
I think if we can get to that point, right? And I with AI, like who knows, right? Who knows which direction policy ends up at with all of these AI advancements because it can go either way. But if we were in a world where things are leaning a little bit more like let's help people and look after each other, then I do see a world where we have a whole new renaissance. It's going to be like a new decade of the renaissance all over again where people are focused on the arts and teaching yoga and building community because AI can't do that.
Exactly right. AI cannot do that. And I think you're right. The resource management is going to be the tough part because we've already seen like the amount of resource consumption to do generative AI is already really, really, really high. And it's burning through resources faster than really we're ready to feed it, right? Like we don't have enough water, electricity, enough chips, data centers. Like it just feels like we just keep feeding this thing, and it's creating incredible returns and opportunities. But yeah, it's like how do we allocate the resources in a society where people also need to eat and have CPU available for their phone and their laptops, and it's not all just going to data centers. So
Yeah,
I'm curious to see how that works.
yeah. The future is going to be one of either extreme.
Yes,
Either it's going to
yeah,
be like total joy, total happiness, or like
yeah.
let's hide.
And hopefully people like you and I help foster the better outcome, right? So that we actually democratize the access and the benefit that comes from AI and founders that are working in different fields. So I love what you're doing. You're helping to make AI useful in the CPG space. Yeah, with a really unique offering. We've got just a few minutes left. Anything you want to talk about before we wrap up?
I guess the next thing I'd be really curious to see would be how CPG changes.
Hmm.
The final thing I want to talk about, right? Like if we're talking about the next 10 years, right? What CPG looks like, and with Travis Kalanick, like what his business looks like. Will we actually have like 10 different brands of chips? Will we actually have 20 different brands of chocolate? Or if
Great
everything is
point.
going to be like raised or like vertically integrated, same farm,
Yep.
same packaging, same co-man, will we actually have? So that would be interesting to see and yeah, that would be my final thought for this
Yeah, it's a great
podcast.
question. How do you even create a brand to start with in an environment like that? How do you create a unique offering? How does it get to market? How does it What does shelf space look like? What does slotting fees look like? How does it, how do you get that, in front of people for the first time? It's a crazy idea. I don't even know because like for us, when we put our product out in the market, our first step was to build a food truck and go out there on the street, which is great because you get immediate exposure to people
Immediate
um,
feedback, immediate movement.
and you iterate the product really rapidly because of that. So, hey, this flavor isn't great. It's not selling. Let's change it. This packaging isn't working. It gives you that super tight feedback loop, which is great for a startup. When everything's integrated from the farm all the way to the end consumer, it makes you wonder, like, how's a brand get started? Or are there brands at all? Like, is it all just white label, you know, house brands essentially? And I don't
I
know.
guess
I
it's
really
the
don't know.
artist, right? Like
It has to be.
creating food is always going to be an art. I don't see that going
Yeah.
anywhere.
Yeah. Jimmy always
Creating new
harps on the
products,
idea.
creating like a unique offering is probably going to be more around like this artist who's a great chef made
Yeah.
it, like that kind of a thing maybe.
That's exactly what Jimmy says all the time. Chef driven, not lab driven when it comes to CPG. Like that's his mantra. Like a lot of these products that are, building a product to meet a certain macro profile or a specific nutrition label, right? Or, certain level of, label cleanliness when it comes to ingredient list, um, often have a hard time because people have to actually eat this food, you
Yeah,
know, at the end of the day.
exactly. Exactly.
Yeah. And if that food doesn't taste great, doesn't sell through, sits on the shelf, and it's the end of the product pretty quick.
Yep. All
Yeah.
that time wasted.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly. All right, so we got just about a minute left here. If people want to find you or Revia, how do they find you? Where can they find you?
Yeah, check us out at revia.ai and you can start with a free deductions audit and see like how much you can win back right off the gate. So
That's
revia.ai.
fantastic, fantastic. And if they want to follow you, LinkedIn, where can they find you?
Yeah, on LinkedIn I'm Komal Devjani. So it's spelled Komal, last name Devjani, Komal Devjani. And then on Instagram I'm Oh So Komal. It's literally OHSO, like so Komal.
Nice, very cool. Kamal, thanks for being on today. I think this was a fantastic episode. I learned a lot, and that's
I did
secretly
too,
one of the
actually.
reasons I love doing this is because I just get to meet so many cool people across, geographically, we meet so many more people, Jimmy and I do doing this than we ever could in person. There's no way we could meet founders from, New York to California and everywhere in between. So thanks for taking the time to do this. We had a great episode today.
Yes, thanks so much. Thanks for taking the time.
All right, take care.
All right, take care. Bye.